The IRS has announced that it is sending millions of payments this very month. Whoever has received a refund check can expect to receive this important letter. In response to the crisis, the U.S. government in 2020 and 2021 decided to send out massive stimulus checks. On one hand, the payments help prevent the American economy from falling into deep recessions and upsend the stock market to fresh all-time highs. On the other hand, experts are saying that they were contributing to the rising cost of living and inflation. The U.S. Census Bureau data seems to support this, as 11.7 million people were moved out of poverty in 2020 thanks to the stimulus. But while most experts agreed that initial stimulus payments were needed as they continued later into 2020 and 2021, many recipients just used them to pay their checks and their bank accounts. A stand by the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco estimated the stimulus added as much as 3 percentage points to the inflation rate by the end of 2021. Although in the initial stages of the crisis, consumers used stimulus money to pay down debt, to the tune of $83 billion in reduction in credit card debt. Those trends have since reversed. Total household debt, which also includes auto loans, home mortgages, and student debt, hit a record of $15 trillion at the beginning of 2022. And the New York Fed, among many others, expects credit card debt to keep rising above the current levels of $141 billion. Current curious labor statistics during the 2020 and 2022 period is how total unfiled job vacancies initially fell at the onset of the crisis, but have since skyrocketed to new record highs. Not all politicians, economists, and financial analysts agree with the belief that the stimulus payments triggered the current inflationary crisis. Even the former presidential candidate Andrew Yang has said that the stimulus payments were too low and too short-lived to fully help the American people. Now, it's all but certain that the stimulus payments in 2020 and 2021 helped jumpstart inflation, but they're not the only cause. Supply chain shortages is another factor that is likely keeping inflation high. The stimulus payments had other effects as well, both positive and negative, with the greatest benefit likely being that they kept the U.S. out of an extended economic contradiction at the onset of the crisis. The IRS this month will send millions of letters to taxpayers who they believe underpaid the tax agency. It's important to pay attention to this letter, everybody, because ignoring it can cause and lead your penalties. The IRS issues roughly 9 million of these letters annually, and this year the letter is unusual, given that the agency had stopped sending many types of notices and letters due to the crisis. Several states have approved stimulus checks. Americans will now have to take action to claim or receive this money. And I know many of you are wondering whether you can actually receive this. Well, here's what I want you to know. 10 states will send one-time payments to taxpayers in the coming months. In addition, 10 states have introduced proposals to send similar payments. Unlike previous relief measures, these payments are much more targeted. According to experts, this is more about helping Americans weather rising prices without making inflation worse. Plans focused on specific sectors of groups or gas cards or disbursements based on income thresholds. In theory, it could help ease the pain caused by the pieces of specific goods or services without putting as much pressure on prices more broadly.
To prepare them for retirement, the Social Security benefits that they will receive are inadequate to allow them to live out their remaining years in dignity. So what this budget resolution brought forth by Senator Paul does is exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. Instead of expanding Medicare to make sure that every man, woman, and child in this country has health care as a human right, this is a budget that would lead to devastating cuts to Medicare, cuts to Medicaid, cuts to other public health programs. Senator Paul's budget resolution would cut nutrition assistance at a time when there are children in America today who are going hungry. It would cut federal aid to education at a time when schools are looking for funding to pay the teachers they need adequate wages. But in the midst of this budget that cuts health care, that cuts education, that cuts Social Security, that cuts every benefit needed by ordinary Americans, this is a budget that would give massive tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country. So you have a situation where right now we have a tax system which is broken, which is corrupt, which allows some billionaires in a given year to pay zero in federal income tax. Zero. Some of the richest people in this country in a given year do not pay a nickel in federal income tax. We have a tax system which allows dozens of major profitable corporations making billions of dollars a year in profit to pay in a given year zero in federal income tax. And we have an effective tax rate today in which billionaires pay a lower effective rate than nurses and firefighters. That's what we have today. And Senator Paul's budget, well, you guessed it, you're right. He would give even more tax breaks to the 1% and to the billionaire class. Unfortunately, the vision of America that Senator Paul's budget puts forward, balancing the budget on the backs of working families, the elderly, the children, the sick, and the poor, in order to make the richest people in America even richer, is not just the vision of Senator Paul. I wish it was just his vision, and I got to applaud his honesty for coming forward and putting his vision on paper. Unfortunately, it is the vision of many, many people in the Republican Party. And this is what they want. Senator Paul and many in the Republican Party do not believe that it was good enough to provide over $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% and large corporations, as they did when Trump was president. Not good enough. The budget that we are debating today, Senator Paul's proposal, would make those tax breaks for the wealthy and the powerful permanent at a cost of more than $2 trillion over the next decade. Cutting nutrition programs for hungry children, throwing millions of people off of Medicare and Medicaid, but providing $2 trillion in tax breaks for the very wealthy. Under Trump, Republicans came within one vote of passing a bill that would have thrown up to 32 million Americans off of health insurance and eliminate vital protections for people with pre-existing conditions like cancer or diabetes, and substantially increase